What?
Hello and welcome to the return of the Fantasy Den, your place where we talk about everything fantasy related to things that are on and going on in the NFL fantasy world, as well as other things that we will come on to in terms of talking about different elements and different types of fantasy, which we'll talk about at some other point. We've not obviously been uh, probably as consistent as we want to be, but we will hopefully be able to start building up and being a bit more recent for all you guys listening out there. Um, it is just a small crew today. So obviously it's myself and our other co-host and producer of the AAW network, Fletch. How are we doing today, Fletch?
I'm good, man. I'm good. I'm very much ready to talk about fantasy. I did get some props, but apparently I just got some wires crossed with what you meant by fantasy. Um, the props have gone. Ready to talk about football fantasy.
Football.
Um, Absolutely. And just on that note, by the way, if anyone does want to be part of this, help us to be a bit more consistent. If you have a passion for fantasy football, you know what you're talking about. Drop the AAW network a message, drop the Fantasy Den a message on social media, come and chat to us because we'd love to get you on board. Because look, there's a team of three of us. We all have lives. It's a Friday night that we record. Things just kind of get in the way. We'd love to get more people in. Um, so yeah, if this sounds like your kind of bag, something you'd like to talk about, give us a message, and we'd love to welcome you onto the team as well.
Yeah, exactly. We're always looking for degenerates like me and Fletch who basically just do too much fantasy football,
Yep.
and it takes over our lives. So it'd be useful to have other people who are just the exact same.
I know
Um,
that every single person who feels that way, everyone in their life tells them how wrong they are and how much of a bad decision it is and questions their decision to do so many fantasy football leagues. If you want some support and people to encourage you when you do this, we'll do just that. We'll be the wind beneath your wings when you do it.
yes, exactly. Um, so this week, in terms of fantasy, we're just over probably the halfway mark for most leagues in the regular season. So I think for most leagues, we tend to run up until about week 13 or week 14. And that's when the playoffs start kicking in, mainly because of the fact that you don't want to be having your playoffs in week 17 and 18 when half the players aren't even going to be playing. So it's much easier to finish it that little bit earlier. Um, so what I thought we would talk about this week is just kind of having a bit of a look back over what's happened so far this season. And we're going to probably title this The Mid-Season Madness. We are coming up into Halloween. It's a mad sort of time. So thought we'd bring that through and discuss a few different things. We'll start off with probably one of the big things is looking at players who have done very well and who haven't done very well based upon their expectations at the start of the season and some of the reasons why maybe some of the maybe more bigger players, so to speak, aren't doing as well, or those players who probably we'd written off and have started to show up. And that's purely from a fantasy perspective. Obviously, there's a lot of different things where just because you do well in the NFL doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be performing points wise, especially with quarterbacks. Um, so what I thought I'd do is we'll start off with quarterbacks and we'll just run through offensive teams. This is going to be based upon, as always, PPR leagues, so points per reception as a standard league, given it's the most with with a few variants that sort of go on. But just looking at the ADP for this season in terms of people being picked for each position and sort of their draft position, the top five. We'll just look at the top five for each position and go through those. So starting with quarterbacks, um, at the start of the season, the top five quarterbacks for this year were Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Jaden Daniels, Jalen Hurts, and Joe Burrow, based upon ADP, so your average draft position.
Yeah.
Now, if we compare that to this season, again, just looking at a standard PPR league, look at the top five. There is only one player off that list who is in the top five. So the top five at the moment is Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert, Dak Prescott, Jalen Hurts, and Drake May. So Fletch, as sort of the guy who's I suppose our resident QB expert, is there anything from that that sort of really stands out in terms of anyone who's sort of a huge surprise in that list, and then anyone who you have been sort of quite disappointed with in terms of QBs this year?
Um, it's I'm a little bit surprised that Drake May has done as well as he has. Especially given what some of the questions were around whether the Patriots could protect him, whether the Patriots could keep him upright, all those different things that were kind of said about what he may or may not do during the season. I'm a bit surprised that Drake May's as high as he is. He's earned it. He's been performing fantastically, especially well since even more since they beat the Bills on Monday Night Football, and he seemed made for Monday night. I mean, he seemed made for prime time. I mean, and he's been excellent ever since. It's not been flashy, but he's been really good. I mean, I've been a bit disappointed. It's not his fault, obviously, but I've been a little bit disappointed with Jaden. A lot of people who drafted Jaden Daniels so high will be disappointed because spent a bit of time out injured. The Commanders have struggled a lot this season, and Jaden Daniels has been at times underwhelming in some of those games where he has been part of it. I think they're the two main. If I had to pick a letdown, again, not his fault. Injuries they get in the way. Can't blame someone for being hurt. But Jaden Daniels probably be a little bit disappointing, and Drake May, I think, more than anything, has surprised me.
Yeah, the one that's really disappointed me, and this is more, I think, more of a personal issue more than anything, is Joe Burrow. And again, I know it's another season where he's got injured, but it's another season where we're drafting him high and he's just not performing. He's not, you're almost wasting a first round pick on him because he is constantly getting injured.
Yeah,
Now, yes, that's part on us because we're picking him knowing how bad that O line is every single year. But at the same time, you still expect him to be pulling up points and to at least be doing something. And he just doesn't seem to be changing that constant injury issue that seems to be plaguing, to be honest, most of his NFL career this season, well, throughout his career. I
yeah,
think he's spent maybe three of his seasons in the NFL pretty much out injured the whole year. And, you know, this is where I wouldn't be surprised if we start seeing him drop down the ADP in future leagues because of this, because people just won't want to trust him anymore.
yeah,
They won't want to pick him because of the fact that he constantly gets injuries. Um, I think probably someone who's surprised me, and this is more because of not because of who he is as a quarterback and what he can do when fit, is Dak Prescott. Like,
yeah,
surely because of how obviously they had one of their own linemen who basically went on IR for the whole season very, very early. They saw, I think another one retired, um, and he just seems to be putting up points and performing well. I mean, I think currently he has. I mean, the biggest thing is he only has three interceptions this year. Um, he has 16 passing touchdowns, which I think is the second highest in the league this season so far, behind Matt Stafford. I think is the only person who's got higher with 17. Um, I will just check. Yes, he is. Um, and he's not even really doing much on the ground in terms of looking at those other QBs. I mean, you look at the likes of Justin Herbert in two, Patrick Mahomes in one, Jalen Hurts, and even Drake May. They're all rushing for 185 yards or more,
yeah,
whereas Dak Prescott's at 56 rushing yards. And and it just shows how impressive he's been in terms of that efficiency of just getting touchdowns and not giving away too many interceptions. Um, I've been surprised by him, and there's quite a few that I've been quite surprised with in terms of that. I think one that I've been really disappointed with because I thought he was going to kick on this year was Bo Nix. I thought with
Yeah,
how settled he came into the league and how he sort of developed very well in the first year, he just seems to have dropped off. And he's not particularly a scrambling quarterback, but I just expected a little bit more from him, and especially with the fact that he's got Peyton as his coach, who is renowned for being almost a QB whisperer in terms of
yeah.
getting the best out of QBs, and he just isn't seeming to hit those heights. Um, so he's been a big disappointment for me. Um, but I think it's probably the one position I think has probably been there's been the most surprises in terms of sort of maybe the players you wouldn't expect to see in the top five. I think if we look at running backs, I probably would say, looking at running backs, the top five are probably the five you would have expected to see in that top five. So looking at the ADP, you had Saquon at one, Bijan Robinson at two, Jameer Gibbs three, Derrick Henry four, and Christian McCaffrey five. And so far this season, in terms of stats, Christian McCaffrey is number one, Jonathan Taylor two, Bijan Robinson three, Jameer Gibbs four, and then Devon Achan five.
Yeah.
And I think looking at that top five, is there anyone that's I mean, I'm not surprised with where that top five is, but is there anyone that sort of has maybe surprised you more in terms of done a lot better than what you expected compared to?
I mean, the sorry, can you repeat that top five? Because I think the stats I'm looking at has someone else at a slightly different top five.
So this is just from the AAW league. So I've got Christian
Right.
McCaffrey at number one, Jonathan Taylor two, Bijan Robinson three, Jameer Gibbs four, and Devon Achan five,
Right, okay.
based upon this season's stats. But that's it, again, it's a PPR league, so
I'm looking at Fantasy Pro, so I don't know why. There we go. That's probably going to be better. There we go. For some reason, it had I was gonna say I had an STD then. Standard marking rather than PPR. Sorry. Because I'm looking at Fantasy Pros here. Yeah. So I think all of us can hold our hands up and say no one saw the Colts season just going the way it was, and Daniel Jones has been excellent. Jonathan Taylor, we've all been aware that Jonathan Taylor's a damn good running back, but no one thought, I think, that he would kick on the way he has and have the dominant season that he's having so far. He's got the most touchdowns in the league by a running back. I think he's got 10. Next best is
yeah.
8. Um,
Mhm.
I think I was literally looking at some of his stats before, and it was like he's got nearly 100 yards more than the next best running back in the league. So in terms of just being on the ground,
Mhm.
Jonathan Taylor being so dominant, I don't think many of us could have particularly predicted he'd be so dominant. Christian McCaffrey is nice to see. He's really nice to see. One, because of the injury last year, a lot of people were unsure whether he would kick on this year and how good a season he would have. He was going in like round three, round four of a lot of leagues that I was in because tis the nature of the beast. You get injured the year before, people have less confidence in you, and it just so it's nice to see Christian McCaffrey, and he may not be as specifically dominant on the ground, but he's been a really good addition to an extension of the passing game as well, which helps people. At the end of the day, we're talking about PPR leagues here, so it's really really helpful to have a running back who's available in the passing game. Bijan Robinson, we know will always be around the top five. Jameer Gibbs will always be in the top five. Devon Achan is a little bit surprising, but at the same time, I mean, what do they have going for them in the air, really, in Miami?
Yeah,
They have to find something, and the only way they're really going to do so is on the ground. So it's not particularly surprising that he's putting up numbers, I guess.
yeah. I think that the interesting one for me, obviously talking about the top five, the real interesting one for me is who's sat at six at the moment, which is Javonte
Devontae Williams.
Williams. And, he left Denver, moving to the Cowboys. And I think that people thought that was his career, not necessarily done, but they signed Jaden Blue. It was possible that this was kind of his last chance to do anything. He'd really sort of failed to deceive at Denver, and people wanted him to succeed. Obviously, he had that massive injury in his
Yeah.
second season, and I just don't think it's kind of worked out for him. But it appears as though he's kind of found a home in Dallas, and has kind of reignited his career. Which, for someone who drafted a lot of him in his early years, I'm kind of glad that he's starting to see or kind of putting up the performances that we expected or that we wanted from him coming out of college. I mean, he's got 592 yards, which I think he is the second most in the
Yep.
league for
Second.
rushing. Obviously, he doesn't have the reception yards that maybe the likes of McCaffrey and that get, but he's still got 23 receptions, which obviously then adds to those points. And has a total of six touchdowns so far. So he's really sort of benefiting from that sort of refreshment in terms of a different team, a different style, a different coach. And I
Yeah.
think it's really sort of, I think it's helping him because, and you find this with a lot of running backs throughout the league, is if you're in a good team who's winning games or is leading in a lot of games, the running back will always benefit because they'll want to run the ball more.
Yeah.
So they will get more attempts, they will get more, likely get more yards. But I think he's really benefiting from having a head coach that does like to involve the running back a bit more. I don't think Denver really did that too much pre Peyton, and I just think that he's kind of reignited his career and probably proven a lot more people that he is a good enough running back to be in the league and isn't just another one of these flash in the pans. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, he's above the likes of Jacobs, uh, James Cook, Ashton Genty, who was the sixth most picked running back. He's above Saquon Barkley. He's above a lot of really good running backs who we expect to do really well. And he's kind of proving everyone wrong, which I kind of like. Um, in terms of the top five, if you'd have told me that these were going to be the top five at the end of the season, I wouldn't have been surprised. I'd have been surprised maybe that Saquon wasn't on, and I think probably one of the biggest disappointments, whether you call it the first route, the first pick curse, or the Madden curse, or whatever you want to call it. I think he's been he's been unlucky because Nick Sirianni and that offense aren't using him the way they did last year.
Yeah.
I think he's being completely undervalued and underused in that offense at the moment. Um, and you can see that from the numbers. I mean, he's currently sat down at what, running back 14 or RB
Yep.
14 in the league. He's not even hit 100 points yet.
No. And you look at week 7, he got 5.2. Week 6, he had 8.7. Week 4, is that 3? He had 9.5. Multiple games where he's not even hit 10 points in the week.
Mm.
Um, it doesn't help him, I think, that you've got Jalen Hurts, who's having a really good year in the air, or a pretty good year in the air. It doesn't help that they've lost their offensive coordinator from last year. AJ Brown has been having some struggles within the offense. They've had too many, I think. What's the terminology that's been being used? Identity problems for that offense.
Mhm.
And it unfortunately the one I think like you say, the one who's clearly paying I think the biggest price for it is Saquon. So I would share that. I would absolutely share that sentiment that it just seems a bit odd to not have Saquon there, but he's not even hanging around where a good game or two will have him straight back in there in that top five.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think it's he's probably the biggest. He is the biggest disappointment this year in terms of output for fantasy. Um, but I think that if it had been that he was sort of like sixth or seventh, he probably wouldn't be questioning it because the others have just been that bit better and
Yeah.
have probably had more involvement. But to be so far behind, I mean, he's currently what over over 40 points behind the top five at the moment. And if the top five continue the way they are, he's going to have to be scoring like 30, 40 points each week from now on
Yeah.
to even be close to getting in that. So I just think yeah, it's one of those that it's the first pick curse and the Madden curse maybe is hit in a different way instead of injuries. It's just complete output.
Yeah. And there are other players. I mean, you look at just as far as running backs are going right now, there are a couple of players who are starting to kick on as well, who are in and around that. Whereas, obviously, Saquon Barkley is having, well, it's just a, yeah, we had the week three 9.5 point game, but the last two are his two worst games of the season in terms of fantasy. And
Mm,
if the Eagles are starting to click a bit more again in the air with Jalen Hurts getting some of those yards on the ground, it's not going to get much better for him. Whereas since the bye week, DeAndre Swift has put up two 20+ point games. Since you've got Cam Scatterboo who week one had very little involvement. Week two got a bit better. Week three got even better. And he's just Cam Scatterboo seems to just be getting better and better each week. Um
I mean,
Javonte,
you got Rico Daldo as I mean, yeah,
yeah,
he only had a 10 point week last week, but the two previous weeks he had 30 plus.
yeah, yeah, 32.4 and 33.9. Just in like these numbers are incredible. Like so it's all well and good, like even seeing like say Saquon Barkley turn up a bit more on the fantasy sheet, but so is everybody else above him. I
Mm,
think the only one who maybe it's a bit hit and miss with him at the moment is Ashton Genty, and he's a
yeah.
rookie. And if but that's about the only one that you can kind of say. And Quinshon Judkins as well, who's been having a fantastic year in Cleveland. Maybe not the greatest on the odd week in terms of fantasy points, but he's turned up, had a couple of 20+ point games, had a couple of 15+ point games. There were even players slightly behind him who were getting starting to put some serious numbers together.
Mhm.
It's only going to get harder to creep back up there with the competition you've got right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's one of those where I think it's yeah, he needs to hope that other teams don't particularly do well. Because as well, I think one thing to point out as well is the fact that, you know, Bijan's had a bye week. Jameer Gibbs is on a bye week.
Yeah,
You know, there are players. Josh Jacobs has had a bye week. There are teams where they're above him and they've already had their bye week, so they're already in that position where they're already one less game than him, and they're still scoring more points than him. So yeah, I think generally speaking, I think running in terms of the running back position in terms of fantasy, I think we're probably the players that are in there you expect to be there, but there
yeah,
are a couple that are probably lower than what we would have expected.
yeah.
In
Couple.
terms of in terms of wide receivers, I think this is a really interesting one because I think there's some that are where you would expect them to be, and there are some that have really shone and probably you wouldn't have expected. So, in terms of going into this season, obviously the number one overall pick in a lot of leagues was Jamar Chase. Um, you would then had Justin Jefferson, CD Lamb, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and then Puka Nakua, and then obviously Malik Neighbors at six. In terms of the current stats for this season for wide receivers, the number one wide receiver is Jackson Smith and Jigba. Then it's Jamar Chase, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Puka Nakua, and then George Pickens. And then in sixth, just to add him in there, is Keenan Allen. So I think this is quite a mixed bag. So obviously we mentioned there are three names there that we mentioned that are in both in Jamar Chase, Amon Ra, and Puka. But the two big, and I would call them big surprises, are Jackson Smith and Jigba, and obviously George Pickens. I don't think anyone really expected his name to be in there.
Yeah,
Now, for me, I think George Pickens has just benefited from CD Lamb being injured. So it's a direct swap there
yeah,
in terms of CD Lamb or George Pickens. But in terms of Smith and Jigba, I mean, yes, he's the number one wide receiver in Seattle, and yes, he's still a top pick. I mean, he was still going 13th overall wide receiver in most leagues, sort of late second, early third, depending on how many teams you've got in your league. But it's still for him to be seen as the 13th best wide receiver at the start of the season to now being the number one wide receiver in the league is quite a big jump.
yeah. I'm just look. I'm looking at here, and I can't remember which week it was that CD Lamb got injured. So it was week three. He came back at the weekend. Weekend just gone. Got 22 points. So in week three, well, obviously he got 0 points. Four, five, six, and seven also no points. Sorry, three, four, five, six. Obviously got 0 points. He got 18, 20.2, and now he's got 20. If you look at the stats for Pickens, he got 6 and 17.8 with CD Lamb in.
Mm-hmm.
Then with CD Lamb out, he had 17.8, 33.4, 13.7, 31.8. Bit hit and miss, but there's two 30 plus point games in there.
Mm-hmm.
CD Lamb comes back, he gets 12.2. So I think you're absolutely right that he's benefited from not having from having no CD Lamb. But the thing is with Dak Prescott, and they do have a couple of other different like just targets for Dak to hit. And with Javonte Williams having such a good year on the ground, it does help that that's where quite a few of that yardage is going. Um, but it's Jackson Smith and Jigba is absolutely the just who on earth saw that coming?
Yeah, like I think everyone knows how good a wide receiver he is. But if you'd have told me at the start of the year that this guy was going to be the number one in terms of the number one yards, I think he's only got four touchdowns, but the fact that he's got what is it 50 receptions, which is about average for the top four. He's on the it's the lower end of the top four, but has built up nearly 200 yards more than anyone else.
Uh-huh.
That's really impressive numbers in terms of that. If he can start converting more into touchdowns, he'll be having an absolute laugh because he could easily be another 30, 40 points ahead of anyone else.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I'm even looking here at like his average yards per game. He's joint seventh in sorry, not yards per game, average yards per reception. He's joint seventh with Ricky Purcell at averaging 16.4 yards a reception. The six players above him have logged half as many snaps, 70% of as many snaps, 30% of as many snaps. it's just they're not coming close. The best in the league for average yards per reception is DK Metcalf, funnily enough, in Pittsburgh. And but in terms of, like you say, in terms of yardage, he's 190 yards ahead of Jamar Chase. 190 yards ahead of Jamar Chase. They played the same amount of games. That's 7 games. So he's averaging, if you what, that's 26, 27. I'm trying to do the math on the top of my head. I'm not very good at that anymore. That's nearly 27 yards on average per game more than Jamar Chase. That's insane.
Yeah.
And when we factor in the fact that his quarterback is Sam Darnold,
Mhm.
and everyone thought that it was Sam Darnold, he was only good because he had Justin Jefferson and because Kevin O'Connell's a quarterback whisperer. I mean, I don't know about anybody else. If you saw anything that happened with Minnesota and the LA Chargers last night, if you watch the Pick'ems video, we're all going to look very, very silly.
Yeah.
Um, like nobody thought that the Seattle offense would be this good. No one thought that Sam Darnold would turn up the way he has. No one thought that Smith and Jigba would get it done on his own, or so convincingly as the wide receiver one as he has done. And that's not disrespect to Smith and Jigba. Nobody thought that, and
Mhm.
it's very impressive to see. Very impressive.
Yeah, I think, like I said, the other three, obviously Chase, Amon Ra, and Puka, you expect them to be up there. They've been brilliant this year. Puka's had a few injuries. Amon Ra's probably, for a team that has so many weapons on offense, he's still managing to be the number one target, which and convincingly the number one target.
Yeah.
That's always a difficulty that we see. We see it with the Browns, obviously, with the Eagles and AJ Brown. Like they have so many weapons on that offense that he's really suffered this year. Whereas, you know, Amon Ra hasn't. He's still been the guy. They've just used the other ones around him.
Yeah. I mean,
Um,
you don't find many more reliable pairs of hands in the league than you do. You don't find someone who gets schemed the way that Amon-Ra just quite does. And if you're in a PPR, Amon-Ra doesn't get flashy, massive numbers in terms of yardage, but when it's a PPR, he gets so many targets in a game, which equates to so many receptions. And I'll say this, I mean, we didn't get the chance to talk about it a couple of weeks ago, but you know the drop he had against the Chiefs?
yeah.
For anyone who's potentially got him, don't ever bench him because the drop against the one thing everyone knows about Amon-Ra St. Brown is just how weirdly relentless he is. That one drop, he won't drop another for 3 years now because that will be in his mind. He'll never drop another pass again.
Yeah.
So it's yeah, absolutely.
It's,
He'll always be around there, and so will Puka because Puka's such a reliable targeting pair of hands. Stafford will always.
well, he's his third down guy. Like every single third, bit like Amon Ra. You need someone who's reliable, who's going to get you that third down. You go to your most reliable guy, and in this case, for the Rams, it's Puka. For the
Yeah,
Lions, it's Amon Ra. And I mean, that's it's kind of evident with the fact that yeah, okay, Amon Ra gets a lot more, has got 7 touchdowns this year, but he only has 538 yards. Puka only has 2 touchdowns and 616 yards,
yeah,
but it's just the volume of touches that he gets every single game, um, that kind of puts him in that picture. And Puka's had injuries. Like I think there's been at least 3 games this year where he hasn't been involved in every single snap. I mean, his snap count is only 76%, which is the same as Jackson Smith and Jigba. And when you compare it to the likes of Jamar Chase and Amon Ra, it's there's 18% difference between him and Jamar Chase, and there's 12% difference between him and Amon Ra. So I mean, the fact that he's still managing to put up those numbers, even with not being on the field all the time, he's
yeah,
doing fantastically well. Um, Obviously, I think there's probably a couple others that are worth noting. Obviously, I think probably the biggest surprise in terms of one of the players that's probably stood out a lot this year, or there's two I would say, is Keenan Allen, his resurgence with the Chargers, and probably the one I would probably more like to talk about is Emeka Egbuka. Obviously, we know the injury issues that the Bucks have had, and again, sort of similar to George Pickens is Emeka Ibuka. He's benefited from not having Godwin, not having Mike Evans, and he's kind of had to take on the mantle of being the wide receiver one in Tampa. And I think he's done it pretty well for a rookie.
Absolutely. I mean, first game, 23.6 fantasy points, then 12.9, 14.5, 20.1, 31.3, 4.4, 9.8. Look, it's not his fault. He had to play the mighty Detroit Lions and that. Somehow the secondary that they picked up off the street just seatbelts. But he's just as a rookie to have walked in and pains me to say it. Everyone will know this. Just to give him as many compliments as I'm gonna have to give him coming out of where he came out of. But he, we knew how good he was in college, and the fact is, and the crazy thing is, last year in college he was the wide receiver two for Ohio State behind Jeremiah Smith, and how crazy to think that Emeka Egbuka, who's this good, was wide receiver two. So it means one of two things. Jeremiah Smith is going to be when he when he
Yeah.
enters the NFL, that's going to be records upon records upon records. Or I mean, just how I mean, yeah, just how good
I mean,
Emeka Egbuka has been in, and how good it is, I guess, to have a quarterback like Baker Mayfield
mhm.
as
I
well.
think probably the one thing I would say about Egbuka is coming out of college, because obviously everyone expected him to come out of college a year earlier than he actually did. He went back to Ohio, which I think surprised a lot of people. Same with Treveon Henderson. I think
Yeah,
everyone expected him to come out of college a year before the year before he did. Um, and I think had he come out that year, he probably would have been probably in the top three wide receivers in the league in terms of being picked in the draft. And he seemed to sort of drop a little bit. I can't remember when he was actually. Did he get drafted in the end?
I know we went first round, was it?
Yeah, but he was obviously behind Ted McMillan. I'm gonna look him up quick before I forget. Uh, so he was drafted in the 19th pick,
Yeah.
which obviously it's still the 19th, right? It's still the 19th pick. But I do think that he may have been a lot higher had he potentially gone the year before. Obviously, it's hard to tell, but
Potent, kind of wide receiver three, kind of wide receiver two off the board because Travis Hunter. Um,
yeah,
so there's that, and well, you had Colston Loveland in there, you had Tyler Warren in there, who were both more receiving tight ends. But obviously, those teams specifically went after them for the tight end ability rather than wide receiver. So yeah, well, I mean, I'll call him wide receiver two off the board because everyone saw Travis Hunter more as a corner than a wide receiver. So I'm happy to
yeah.
say wide receiver two off the board.
I mean, again, probably because it's been a while since we looked at. I mean, the draft class before, in terms of wide receivers, Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Neighbors, Roma Dunze. I'd have probably put him in with those lot off the base of that season where he was the wide receiver one in Ohio.
Yeah.
But
I,
Brian, he was better. I would say he was higher than Brian Thomas Jr., probably higher than Xavier Worthy at the time, higher than Ricky, definitely higher than Ricky Pearsall, Leggett, and Coleman. So,
yeah.
you know,
I
he
mean,
would have been in those talks at the top, probably replacing someone like a Dunze, and maybe he would have dropped. But
probably, but he wanted to go back and beat Michigan, didn't he?
and he
And
didn't, did he?
it finally get the one win over Michigan that it was eluded him throughout his whole college career. That never happened. They went on and got like second place, and ended up, kind of the second award of the year, which was winning the national championship. But first place would have been beating Michigan, which he was unable to do.
But no, he's been impressive this year, and again,
Absolutely.
he has benefited from injuries to other wide receivers, It's mainly sort of Mike Evans. Obviously, if people listen to the Hurdle the Line pod that we did, the previous show, obviously we talked about the fact that we're probably going to see the end of the 11-year 1,000 yards from Mike Evans, which is sad. Um, but again, injuries happen. Were there any sort of wide receivers that really stood out in terms of just being a lot worse than you would have expected?
I'm not in terms of worse per se. There are a couple of wide receivers I may have expected more from. Again, in terms of a fantasy perspective,
Mm,
Justin Jefferson. You'd want more out of a Justin Jefferson because he's what, wide receiver 18 so far this year. Granted, with a bye week, but he's wide receiver 18. Jalen Waddle, we might have, I think, wanted to see more out of Jalen Waddle. Lad McConkey potentially wanted to see more out of, but I say Keenan Allen has really taken most of the uh, targets and the yardage for the Chargers. Um, we all wanted to see, I say all, I think most of us wanted to see the Atlanta Falcons take a step up and get Drake London more targets. That's not quite happened. Where's he now on? He's
wide
50.
receiver 17.
I've got
It's
his 50 in
15.
it. Um, yeah, I mean, just the, and even I think the only other name I'll mention in terms of people I feel like have been, again, I can't say that they specifically are disappointing, but in terms of fantasy football, they're not putting up the numbers that maybe I thought they would have. Garrett Wilson. Um, but then, let's ask Woody Johnson about that one.
Yeah,
And whose
I
quarterback
think
is, so
yeah, that's an odd one. I think a lot of people always Garrett Wilson has the potential to be a top 5 wide receiver if he just have a decent enough quarterback who could throw the ball, or at least a quarterback that isn't scared to throw the ball, and then get absolutely ridiculed by his owner. But um,
or an offensive scheme
mm,
that isn't mind-boggling.
mm,
Uh, not to throw back to 2 weeks ago, but look at what happened in London to end the half.
yeah,
The coaching is mind-bogglingly stupid. Um, in terms of game management and clock management and all that stuff. So if he had someone was a bit less inept, I guess that helps too.
mm. For me, probably the my biggest disappointment, and this is someone who again who I because of the position that I ended up drafting in, someone who I ended up picking a fair amount of, and I'm annoyed to hell as to how bad he's done, is Brian Thomas Jr.
Yeah.
I think
Okay.
this year you expected him to be, he had a great rookie season, an absolute fantastic rookie season, and he currently sits at wide receiver 32, given the fact that he was eighth in terms of wide receiver drafted wide receivers. So he was 15. His ADP was 15.8. So you're looking at middle of the second round, and he's performing like a wide receiver who should have actually been picked in, you know, probably the 7th round. And that's frustrating because I think with a lot of them, and especially certainly when I've watched him, it's not like he isn't getting the targets because he is. He's had. If we look at his sort of game logs, each game 7 targets, 12 targets, 6 targets, 7, 6, 10, 7. It's not like he's not getting targeted in games, but his catching in terms of this season, bar one game, which was against Seattle, 1 catch out of 7, 4 out of 12, 2 out of 6, 5 out of 7. Okay, he did okay there, but didn't really have many yards for it. 4 out of 6, 8 out of 10 was the big one, and then 3 out of 7 in the last London game. He's just not catching the ball, and it is a mixture of him not catching the ball and also being targeted by Trevor Lawrence in positions where he shouldn't be targeted. But
Yeah.
from what I've seen, he's dropping a lot of catches.
Yeah, oh yeah, he is. You can sometimes put out when there's a wide receiver one with a lot of targets, not a lot of receptions. A lot of the time, it's just when you throw the ball away, when a quarterback throws the ball away, they have to put a target on that.
Mm,
So they just do whoever's closest within that area. Normally, if they're launching it and just kind of getting it out there, it's the wide receiver one. Jameson Williams gets that a lot. I think he gets a lot of those I've seen on the stat sheet. But absolutely, he's been dropping some daft ones. There have been some where I mean, look at the argument that Liam Cohen and Trevor Lawrence had earlier in the season because Trevor Lawrence it was an easy throw, put it on the numbers, and he had it on his back shoulder when it was the
mm,
Trevor Lawrence is making some ridiculous, and that normally like it say that in a really good way. I mean, ridiculous in the bad way. Throws that he should not be making, and
mm.
oh, but he should be making those throws make much better than he is doing, and so yeah, I mean, he's been let down on a couple of times by that, but you're absolutely right that he's dropping too many passes. He's not getting the separation that he should be doing. There are a lot of things that he isn't doing to put
Mm.
himself in the best position or to put the Jags in the best position to be winning games, and that's just it's frustrating, but it is what it is. Um,
Yeah, and I mean, you, there are arguments you could say, well, is he actually, is he receiving targets? Oh, obviously they brought in Travis Hunter. Maybe it would be a case of that he might be the guy that they're now targeting. But Travis Hunter had his first ever touchdown in week 8 or in week 7. Sorry, in week 7. So are we in? No, we're in week 9. Aren't we?
we're going
Week
into
8.
week 8 because it's
We're going
college
into week.
football's
Yeah,
going into
yeah,
week
yeah.
9.
Yeah. So 7 weeks in, Travis Hunter's got his first touchdown. So fair enough. Okay, it might be maybe he's not actually. Maybe he's doing a lot of the hard yards and he's not getting the touchdowns. If we look at Travis Hunter right now in terms of his yardage, so far he's had, apart from obviously the Rams game, there's only been one other game where he's actually had more than 7 targets in a game, and that was the Carolina Panthers week 1. So it's not like he's taking targets off of Brian Thomas. Brian Thomas is still in most games averaging more targets than he is. It's just he's not making the plays. He's not making catches, and that's the biggest problem. It's not a case of, you know, it's it's just poor play from a wide receiver you expect more from.
Yeah.
And it might be that this is he's having second season syndrome or whatever, and it does happen. But I don't know. He's been really disappointing for me, and that's more of a personal level, probably more than anything, because of the fact that I've drafted a lot of him. But
Yeah.
there you go. Finally, we'll come on to tight ends because I think this is again, it's another area where I think it's probably fairly expected, or at least there's a few that you would expect. There's quite a few that maybe you weren't, but I think that they're in and around. In terms of the ADP going into this year, someone who I saw got, I think I'm pretty sure I've seen him drafted in a few leagues where he was drafted in the first round. Brock Bowers was the number one running tight end in the league. Trey McBride second, George Kittle third, Sam Laporta fourth, and TJ Hawkinson was number 5, with Travis Kelce as 6. Now, in terms of the top 5 this season, we have Jake Ferguson number 1, Trey McBride number 2, Tyler Warren number 3, Dallas Goedert at number 4, and Travis Kelce number 5 with Kraft at number 6.
Yeah.
And weirdly enough, just because I thought it'd be worth mentioning him, Aronde Gadsden is number 7. A rookie at the Chargers is number
Right.
7.
Hang on myself. Let me just get the That's what. Okay.
So in terms of this, is there anyone that sort of stands out to you that's probably done a lot better, or is a surprise in terms of the top five there?
Depending on if he listens to this one or not, I might catch some shit for this. But Travis Kelce in the top five, he's not been what we expect of him the last couple of years. I'm a bit surprised. I am a little bit surprised that he's jumped up as high as he has into fifth. Jake Ferguson makes a lot of sense. We know that Dak Prescott likes his tight ends. We know that Jake Ferguson is a good, reliable target. Um, and that's seen, and it's not Jake Ferguson's consistently putting up around 17 plus point games. Only a couple of them he hasn't, but it's consistent the games that he's putting up.
Yeah,
Trey McBride,
there's only one game this season where he's hit below double digits, and that was week one against the Eagles.
um, exactly. And but I'm going to say that the other I say bad week, week six, when he had 12.3, but I mean, consistently good numbers. Trey McBride makes a fair bit of sense. Makes more sense now that the Cardinals are not playing Kyler Murray,
Hmm.
that players are actually receiving the ball. Marvin Harrison Jr. hasn't been what we expected him to be. Trey McBride seems the next logical step for getting targets and being targeted within a game and seeing a lot of that, seeing a lot of the ball. So I think that makes a lot of sense. Tyler Warren has been a fantastic asset for the Colts, and the way that they've schemed it, the way that they've schemed this season has been really impressive. So it doesn't surprise me at all seeing that. I think it's like I said, the only person in that top five who surprises me a little bit is Travis Kelce, just because of the way he's been the last couple of years and seems to be on a little bit of a resurgence. Maybe it's Taylor Swift, and this
Maybe it's the engagement because
maybe it's the exactly
we all know how Josh Allen. I mean, he had an MVP in his engagement season, so and look
exactly,
how
and now
average
he's
he's
married.
been. Yeah, now he's married. It's all gone to shit.
Exactly. So, um, just retire then get married, Travis. Retire then get married because clearly being engaged is the thing. Everything else makes somewhat sense. I mean, you're gonna have to forgive me if I completely missed someone. Brock Bowers is injured, isn't he?
Yeah, he's spent a good. I think he's been out since week four.
Yeah. So um makes sense why he's not there. Nothing particular here that's out there or outlandish or really too stand out for me. I'm not
Yeah,
gonna lie.
I think Dallas Goedert's an interesting one because I mean, you look at his years in terms of his PPR rankings. This is currently he's at the highest he's ever been in terms of PPR rankings, as being the fourth wide receiver at the moment. But when you look at him and what he's like, most seasons, especially sort of last season, he only played 10 games. Every other season after that, he's always been in and around the 10 mark when he's played more than 12 games. But this season, it just seems like and then it goes back to the idea of where Saquon has suffered and where AJ Brown has suffered. Dallas Goedert has benefited and has become used a lot more in that offense, in that Eagles offense. And I think that's kind of how it's kind of worked with that team, is that they're not spreading it around as much in the Eagles team. They pick one or two and they go with those, and that's it. Um, whereas someone like, you know, a Tucker Craft, I think he's doing well, but I don't think he gets nearly as many targets as you would expect him to get because of the fact they do spread it around in that team,
Yeah.
in that team. The one thing I would say about Tyler Warren in terms of, because I mean Tyler Warren in terms of his ADP going into this season, he was sat at 10. which I think for a rookie was probably about right because we don't know how he's going to perform in the NFL. But also, I think in terms of compared to some of the other ones, a bit like Brock Bowers, we saw how much he was used as a receiving tight end in college. Like he was overused all as he was the constant target. And I think, like you say, the fact that the Colts have been so good this year, and they've used him in like the running game, they've used him in screenplays, they've used him in the red zone, like they've used him everywhere. It's no surprise that he's the third best tight end in the league at the moment, or third
Yeah,
for points. Um, and again, I think he's benefiting from the scheme that he's in, which you could probably say probably someone who's really disappointed me this year. Um, and I say really disappointed. I think it's more just the fact that he probably isn't getting as much involvement as you would expect. Is Sam Laporta? I mean, he is currently sat at tight end 8, so he's not too far down the list. But he's also got he's about 50 points behind Jake Ferguson in terms of points. So he's quite a way off.
yeah,
And to be honest, there is a significant drop off, as we tend to see with tight ends after the third tight end. You usually only have 2 or 3 top tight ends in the league, and then the rest are kind of just in that little bracket behind. I thought Sam Laporta would be in that bracket of top 3, top 4, and he's in the bracket below that, and I'm a bit surprised by that. And I think that's mainly because I just don't think he's seeing the targets that you would expect.
yeah.
And
Absolutely.
I mean, you'll know more than probably than anyone in terms of his performances, but I think I've just been a bit surprised that he hasn't been used as much.
Yeah, I mean, it's just one of those with Sam that he had the great rookie year, had an okay year last year, and it seems like this is his level. And a lot of the hype we live off with Sam Laporta is that rookie year. That's not to say that he isn't as good as the rookie year at all. I don't want to put that on him. He's very very talented, very very good, and a huge asset. But one thing that I think Sam Laporta does well is open Amon-Ra up.
Mm,
Even better than I think that's where he really, unfortunately, I think in terms of receptions and yards and touchdowns, it's where he kind of shoots himself in the foot by opening so much up for St. Brown. And we all know that if Jared Goff has the option of Sam Laporta or Amon-Ra St. Brown, he's gonna go to Amon-Ra St. Brown. Um,
yeah,
it's just
and,
it's nature of the beast, unfortunately.
and I mean he's always going to suffer a little bit more with how dominant you are on the ground as well, because then
Yes.
he's going to be required to block more, and obviously that takes him out of the potential throwing lanes. I
Hmm.
think I think this is probably where tight ends like Sam Laporta suffer because they're good blockers.
Yes.
And this isn't taking anything away from the likes of Travis Kelce over the years, the likes of Trey McBride, but they don't need to block as much because of the system that they use. They don't need to block, which means that they are naturally more receiver based than they are blocking based. And that's kind of what you tend. That's I mean, this is the difficulty with tight ends is it's a dual position. They're expected to block and they're expected to catch, whereas
Yeah.
other positions you don't. It's more weight towards the catching than it is necessarily the blocking. Um, but I think that's probably where he's going to be because of the way that you lot play and because of the way that you scheme things. He's likely going to be involved more in the blocking and the run play than he is necessarily going to be in the catching. He's just kind of like a bit like Mark Andrews in a way. He's a luxury to have down the field, but he's not going to be your main target,
Exactly.
which is a shame because I think a lot of people thought, especially after, like you said, after his rookie season, that he would be more like a Travis Kelce, a target man, than he has been. But it is what it is. So that kind of covers, I suppose, the the big surprises, any of the players that maybe haven't done as well as we expected. Um, in terms of sort of mid-season awards, I just want to do it as a very quick one.
Yeah.
Just look, who do you think has been your MVP in terms of fantasy football this year so far from what we've kind of looked at? Who's been the one person that you think's really stood out compared to any of the others?
It's an odd one. In that many leagues, and I've tried to do that much. I've tried to have a good variety across. So I'm not always picking Jamar Chase, for example. Obviously, you're a bit stuck when it comes to um, depending on where you're drafting. Obviously, you're not getting Jamar. If I'm drafting mostly at number 7, I'm never getting Jamar Chase ever
Yeah.
in leagues. There are a couple of leagues where, like I said, I was very, very lucky to be able to pick up Jonathan Taylor.
Mhm.
And I don't think you understand how much I'm chuckling and giggling and having so much fun at the moment, having Jonathan Taylor. The drafting Drake May has been really good, and again, in terms of value in particular, Drake May was going quite late in a lot of drafts. Got some really good value out of him. So I think those two, right now, I'm going to put down and say they're the two I'm taking the most enjoyment out of having. Um, the only other one I think consistent pretty much every week and has done me really, really bloody well has been Cameron Dicker. Dicker the kicker.
Kicker the kicker. Yeah, I think he was probably in most leagues probably fourth or fifth kicker. And I think, is he the number one kicker at the moment so far this year?
After week 7, this hasn't been updated yet. It's Brandon Aubrey. But
Yeah, as expected.
yeah,
But he's the number two, which you know probably about right in terms of his position. I think, like I say, he's probably a little bit higher, but yeah, I think he's been. I think he's probably saved a fair few leagues for those that have kickers in their leagues. I know again, it's not really a popular one now. I think a lot of people are getting rid of kickers, but kickers are people too. They still deserve to be in leagues.
yes, they are,
Um,
Sam.
um, in terms for me, obviously people know I love my tight ends. For me, it's been Jake Ferguson. I've drafted him everywhere. Whenever I've had an opportunity, I've looked at like if I know that I'm not going to in most leagues. I'm not taking Brock Bowers in the first or early second. If I can get someone like a Trey McBride, I will take him. But most of the time, I'm waiting on a tight end, and most of the times I've picked Jake Ferguson. So to me, he's been my MVP just purely because of how consistently good he's been throughout the year. And part of that is because I'm in most leagues that I'm in, especially the ones that I run, I tend to run a tight end premium anyway. So I've benefited even more in that sense because he's been brilliant in terms of his consistent high scoring, but also then you add in that tight end premium, whether it be zero point 0.5 or whatever, he's then gaining extra points on top of that. So for me, he's been my MVP this year. Um, and that's mainly, like I said, mainly because I've basically picked him up at every other point that I can. Finally, and we won't spend too much time on this, but I just thought it'd be useful if we just look at maybe a couple of players for this week, as we always do,
Yeah.
in terms of players that we are looking at that maybe aren't just your typical picks. Maybe someone if you're struggling, it's obviously with probably the big thing with because of the number of injuries that we've had and not the high profile injuries that we had. I think it's this has become more important in terms of who are you going to slot in those positions, who are where you've got like 4 or 5 players who are potentially are predicted to score anywhere from 9 to 12 points. Who are you picking that could potentially be a 20 pointer or who can even be a 15 pointer? So, in terms of quarterbacks, who have you got that's maybe sort of someone that you're looking at as a potential replacement for an injured quarterback. Obviously, with the likes of Jaden Daniels has been out, Lamar Jackson has been out, um, Joe Burrow is obviously out. Who's been that sort of next guy down that you've sort of thought, especially for this week, is kind of this guy is a must?
Again, I said it before. Drake May has been someone who I've really, really enjoyed going to, and I think I've benched a couple of people this year that I've got way ahead. Drake May was often the second quarterback I took. He was my backup, and
Mhm.
he's now my starter in a couple of leagues. Um, and I'm very, very glad that I totally forgot to bench Justin Herbert this week in one of my leagues because he did me really well last night. Um, I think, but yeah, my number one go to when I need to pull something out the bag right now is Drake May. Um, because again, just purely on the basis of I picked him up. That's one of the. He's one of those where I've not exactly had great variety in my backup quarterbacks. I love the Detroit Lions, but I'm not picking Goff when I've got Drake May right there because Drake May has more fantasy potential. And yeah, he's been a huge asset to me so far, particularly again since the Monday Night Football against the Bills.
Yeah. Um, I think he's now probably to me he's probably looking at being a potentially a QB1 for someone in next, especially coming into next year's draft. I think he will be one of the top 10 to 12 wide receivers as QBs picked next year. Um, in terms of, I suppose for me, tight ends that I would probably be looking at. Um, I mean, he's already played, but obviously we mentioned Gadsden. Um, he's putting up some phenomenal points and has come really out of nowhere. Obviously, a rookie who's joined the Chargers and has again benefited from Will Dissly being on IR this year and has done really well. But someone that I've sort of was thinking about this year in terms of, or this week in terms of someone who, if you don't have a Jake Ferguson, so if you don't have, one of the top performing wide receiver tight ends, and someone you may want to stick in a potential flex position is K Dotton. I think with all the issues that obviously the Bucks have, he's really benefiting as well for being a sort like what we talked about with the likes of George Kittle for Brock Purdy, what um other tight ends have become for these players, for these quarterbacks. He's starting to show that he can be a reliable target for Baker Mayfield. It didn't start off well at the start of the season, but he's now starting to pick up, and I think he's going to be used a lot more, especially with the wide receiver issues that they do have at the moment. So he would be one that I would be looking to start either in the tight end position or in one of the flex positions if you're running low on players and he's either available or you've got him. Um, in terms of maybe one of the other positions, I would maybe be looking at someone like, again, a flex position in a league where you may be struggling. I'd maybe be looking at a Marvin Mims. Obviously, I've already mentioned it on the Hurdle Line preview show as one of my potential targets for um, or potential picks when doing the fancy game day. And while we're on it, we may as well talk about the fact that they are our sponsors. And again, go over to the Hurdle Line. You can check out what we've talked about with that. But if you do fancy doing a little bit of yourself and you want to go, and you may think, actually, I want to go and do that now, and you've mentioned it, use our code and you'll get a £7.50 free play for this weekend. Remember, games start at 5 o'clock, not 6 o'clock. There are 5 o'clock kickoffs, so you'll need to be on the ball, be a little bit early with it.
Yep.
But if you use our code Hurdle without the U, so HRDLE, Hurdle without the U,
No heard over the line without you though.
Exactly. It's almost like we don't do this every single week. And they will give you a free £7.50 game, which again you can split between multiple games. You maybe want to do it as they have a £3 game and £5 game, or they do have the £7.50 game, which you can put it all on. Um, Gives you a chance to earn a little bit of money, have a bit more, uh, you know, degeneracy when it comes to fantasy football, um, and just have a little bit of enjoyment as well. So I think we'll probably leave it there because there's not really. I mean, we haven't got our running back guru this week,
Yeah.
unfortunately, and we will have to work on sorting out a wide receiver guru
Yep.
again. If you know a lot about wide receivers and you want to join and help us and support us and be part of the fantasy den, then again, drop us a line and we'll certainly look to potentially get you involved. We're always looking for wide receiver help. Um, because as far as my wide receiver choices go, I'm basically Wandale Robinson till I die, and I will still stand by it. Um, but until next week, Fletch, have
Whoa,
a good
whoa, whoa, whoa,
weekend.
whoa, whoa, whoa. Hang on, hang on. I told you, I've done research. I'm not letting this research go to waste. I'm just giving this one. I'm giving one
Okay,
tip. Um,
okay, one tip.
One tip, fantasy game day. If you are looking for this week, there's 6 teams out on bye. You might be needing to look to go into a little bit of depth throughout the season. This week might be a good week. If you do have a league where they do Saturday waiver wires, I have just learned the hard way that one of the leagues I'm in does not. And I now have to wait till Wednesday, even though I need this person for Sunday, and I'm one person down in my roster. Uh, you might be looking for a quarterback this week. Again, double helpful if you're playing fantasy game day because you don't need to worry about all that sort of stuff. If you're looking for a bit of a more valued option, or again, if someone who may be dotted around the waiver wire a little bit, uh, maybe on someone's bench that you could trade for right now, I'd be looking at Bo Nix this weekend. He is, where do we say he was in terms of quarterback rankings? Sixth at the moment in terms of quarterback rankings, although that was after he had a blockbuster fourth quarter against the Giants. And I'm not just recommending you take Bo Nix after one quarter against the Giants. What I will say is, though, Bo Nix, they've got the Cowboys this weekend at home. The Cowboys, as for as good as they have been on offense, they have the 32nd ranked defense per PFF. Per PFF, they are 32nd in run defense with the score of 36.8. The next worst as is the Ravens with a score of 51.2. You don't find many discrepancies between first and second or 31st and 31st that are as big as nearly 15 points. They're a good chunk worse than the rest. They are 25th worst team, 25th best, so it'd be like eighth worst, seventh worst team in coverage. They have given up, they are 23rd in takeaways with 6 takeaways all season, 3 interceptions, which is 22nd in the league. They are 30th, the 30th defense in points per game with 29.4. 32nd in the league in passing yards allowed per game, 260.3 on average. 31st in the NFL in passing yards per play, 7.66 on average. This is a Dallas Cowboys team that is really struggling to stop the pass. They have an okay pass rush. It is average at best, but they are horrible in coverage. They are really, really struggling. Bo Nix might not have the most weapons, but Bo Nix can definitely get the ball out there. Bo Nix also might find some sort of success with the ball on the ground against the Cowboys team. They have the Broncos are number one in pass blocking, 12th in run blocking. Though the 21st in passing, I think this would be a week for Bo Nix to finally um, have a full four-quarter game, not just a one-quarter game like you had against the Giants. So for me, if you want a value quarterback pick this week, while there aren't very many options, while As we've both mentioned that Jared Goff might be the greatest fantasy quarterback of all time. He's not available this week. Neither is Kyler Murray. Neither is Matt Stafford. Neither is Sam Darnold. Neither is Geno Smith. I know we're all devastated about that one. And neither is Trevor Lawrence. While other quarterbacks like Lamar Jackson might not play, Michael Penix Jr. might not play, it's not the greatest week for quarterbacks overall. This is a week where someone like Bo Nix can really, really bolster your roster. Actually, I did a lot of research. I've done a lot of notes, and I really, really, really didn't want this to go to it. Otherwise, Mrs. Fletch was going to get this rant. Um,
Yeah,
she doesn't play fantasy football.
needed to save her from that run. But no, it's great. It's good. It's useful having this sort of knowledge and that, especially for someone. I mean, everyone knows that I've always waxed lyrical about Bo Nix over the last 6 months or so. Obviously, we talked about him being a disappointment this year, which he has been. Um, but hopefully, fingers crossed, the stats hold up because again, I've got a lot of Bo Nix in a lot of leagues
Yes.
because I draft with my heart sometimes and not my head.
When you're in about
So that's the best way
4,000
to
leagues, you can do that in a few of them, though.
Yeah, that's true. You can do it when you have the opportunity to. But yeah, brilliant. Well, that's great. We'll leave it there for now. I think we've kind of been on for I don't know just over an hour, which I think is probably longer than what we do mostly.
Yeah.
So yeah, I hope everyone who's listening has a great week in fantasy. Obviously, it's a big week in terms of some of the big teams with no games this week on the buys. So hopefully you haven't done what I've done and basically drafted a load of these teams together and have a really crap week. Um, Fletch, I hope you have a good week on fantasy and have a good
You too.
weekend being able to watch loads and loads and loads of college football and the NFL.
And neither of us have to worry about watching our NFL teams this weekend, and
Yeah, we get
that's
to.
that
We,
stress.
it's one of those rare weekends where we can just chill and actually watch the NFL and enjoy it.
Yeah, it would help though if like it wasn't Michigan State on Saturday, so I've basically got the college version of a derby that my team's in, but we'll take it. If you do have a good weekend in fantasy, you want to come and talk to me and Sam about fantasy football, by the way, just remember to go to the links in the description of the episode. Follow the Fantasy Den, follow the AAW network, follow Sam, follow me, and join our Discord where we have a special channel dedicated to fantasy football. Come and tell us all about it.
Brilliant. Have a good weekend, and we'll see you hopefully next week.